2021 general election are Ann Davison and Nicole Thomas Kennedy. The Seattle City Attorney is responsible for overseeing over 100 attorneys in the city's law department and supervises all litigation in which the city is involved. The forum rules are as follows. Questions will be answered one candidate at a time, with one candidate going first and then the other, in alternating order for each question. There is to be no interrupting, but candidates are allowed one challenge to take issue with something another candidate stated in their response to be used at the conclusion of any question. The challenging candidate may have 1 minute to challenge, and the challenged candidate will have 1 minute to respond. Personal attacks are not allowed. Please no screen recording. Each candidate will give a 2 to 3 minute opening statement, followed by timed pre-written questions, then audience questions until 1 minute closing statements. Audience members should write non-leading questions intended for both candidates that may be reworded for clarity, brevity, and bias via the Q&A box in Zoom. Candidates, please take 2 to 3 minutes to explain why you are running for office and how the city as a whole would benefit from your service. You'll see the timer box up at the top to give you that time. Candidate Davison, we'll start with you.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us on another video meeting. And I appreciate your taking time to listen to me specifically tonight. And thank you for participating and being an engaged voter. I am Ann Davison, and I've lived in Seattle for 25 years. I've been an attorney for 17 years of those. I went back to law school in my mid-30s and became a civil attorney. I've been practicing for 17 years, areas of business, immigration, contracts, a variety of civil areas when I provide preventative legal advice to avoid litigation, advising entities and individuals, business owners, families, all types of people in all sectors of society. I've also been an arbitrator and a teacher, international business law to non-native English speakers, and I'm also a youth soccer coach. I'm running to be your city attorney because we need professional, nonpartisan leadership if we are to see civility, livability, and respect return to our city. I'm an independent thinker and a Seattle mom, not an activist ideologue, and I think this approach is vitally important to implement our laws and to enhance public health and safety. Some background for me is I voted for Obama and Clinton and Biden, and I consider what occurred at the US Capitol on January 6th to be democracy threatening and contrary to my values. I have a further political value statement on my website, neighborsforann.com, which anyone is welcome to read. If elected, I will make sure our approach to the law is fair, professional, and respectful of everyone. With criminal law enforcement, we'll focus on high impact crime, centering victims of crimes in the process, and build upon alternative interventions with accountability. And I will surround myself with seasoned experts wanting to serve the public, the people of Seattle, our city of Seattle, so that we can talk about the future in a hopeful way. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Thomas Kennedy.
Thank you.
Please share your opening statement.
Thank you for having me tonight. So no matter our neighborhood, income, or race, all of us want to feel safe and secure in our homes and on our streets in this city that we love. For some of us, simply finding a home we can afford would exponentially increase our personal safety and ability to access the healthcare that we need. Many of our neighbors are visibly suffering under the policy decisions made by elected officials in the past, decisions that poured our tax dollars into building a system to criminalize being poor or homeless. The city attorney's office has total discretion over who to prosecute for low-level crime, and 90% of those prosecutions punish our neighbors with extremely low incomes, many of whom are people of color or people with disabilities. These neighbors are often stealing a sandwich or sleeping under an awning as a means of survival. As a public defender, I saw firsthand just how many of our neighbors went to jail instead of receiving the treatment or mental health services they actually needed. And you know who's not being prosecuted and filling our jails? Bosses who commit wage theft, which is a crime, companies that cause massive environmental destruction, which is a crime, or corporate landlords that illegally evict their tenants through fraud, which is also a crime. This is a choice we don't need to keep making. We should be pursuing the corporate entities who have been getting away with damaging our community for decades. Instead of prosecuting crimes of survival, we should expand access to treatment and community services that interrupt harm and advance healing and connection. My office will create a victims' compensation fund to repair harm done to people and small businesses. Survivors of interpersonal violence tell us they need a trauma-informed approach. violence prevention programs, and more resources to stay safe and heal, with prosecution as a last resort. I will protect the city of Seattle by making sure those that have done large-scale harm to our city are held financially accountable for their actions instead of taxpayers. Jail is not the answer to our affordable housing crisis. Housing is. I will collaborate with the mayor and council to change our land use code so we can build affordable housing quickly. If we want safe and healthy communities, we must join together and demand better from the city attorney's office. Vote for me, and I will take our transformational vision to the Seattle Municipal Court. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now begin with questions. And again, I'd ask the audience to please submit questions via the Q&A button, but we'll begin with several from the League of Women Voters. We'll start with candidate Thomas Kennedy. What do you think are the three most important issues facing the city of Seattle, and what actions would you propose to positively affect those issues? You have 2 minutes to answer.
Sure. So I think the first most important thing that we have facing the city of Seattle is we need a progressive revenue stream. So the city council passed the jumpstart tax last year. Since that time, it's been under constant attack from wealthy corporations and mega landlords who don't want to pay their fair share of taxes, the same people that have donated to my opponent's campaign. So I think and the jumpstart tax is meant to fund the Green New Deal and affordable housing alternatives and transportation, all things that the city desperately needs. And so I think defending that progressive taxation is the most important thing that we can do for Seattle right now, because the second thing that the Seattle needs most is, and which is wrapped in with that, is we need affordable housing. Far too many people living on the street. Even if we wanted to put every single homeless person that's sleeping on the street right now in jail, we simply couldn't. There's not enough beds in jail. We need to find actual real solutions. And just talking about what jail entails, that's putting someone in jail for a year is $73,000. Putting someone in permanent affordable housing with wraparound case management services costs $23,000 or $25,000 a year. We could be spending our money so much better and be getting a lot more stability out of it. I think the third most important thing is misdemeanors. Right now, what we're doing with a lot of misdemeanors, not all, but a lot of misdemeanors, is prosecuting poverty and disability. There's nothing about prosecuting poverty or disability that makes someone, makes a person who doesn't have anywhere to sleep suddenly have shelter, or makes someone with a mental illness suddenly well. Jail does not help those things. And we are really lacking in funding those things. And instead, what we're doing is arresting people, putting them in jail for a short amount of time, completely destabilizing whatever they've managed to put together for themselves, and then spitting them back out onto the street with nothing. So I think taking new approaches where we actually care for people instead of imposing punishment all the time is the third most important thing that we can do with the city attorney's office. And yeah, I can't see the timer. I'm sorry.
I apologize for that. We are going to see what we can do to fix the timer. So give me one moment and we'll get that sorted. Let's see. Apologize for the delay. So see, Tiffany, are you able to start a timer on yours so we can ensure that people can see it?
I see that Marilee is back. Marilee, would you like to do that?
I'm sorry, the timer is not working on my screen. If you could take over, that'd be great.
I am having challenges getting it to load. I apologize.
Should be able to do it. Let me, what's the time limit for the question?
2 minutes.
All right, let me get to it.
Apologies for the delay, y'all. Sign of the times. Okay, so candidate Davison, what do you think are the three most important issues facing the city of Seattle, and what actions would you propose to positively affect those issues?
I think that they are intertwined issues. I think they're significant. It obviously is the number of people we have that are unhoused. It's not just within the city, but within the county. I participated in that King County point in time count in the middle of the night, January 2020, when they last did one, when we got to that number of 11,751. That is a significant number, and it's probably not accurate. It's probably higher because the methodology by which we counted was just visibly looking and to see an estimation of how many people were in a vehicle or a tent or similar structure that we could identify. And so that is really critical. And when we're talking about what can we do, we're not looking to criminalize someone for any kind of a status. That is the opposite. I think that's the opposite of compassion. We are a compassionate, big-hearted city, and to pervert the compassion to apathy is not what we do. We want to make sure we are providing meaningful impact. A lot of that, people are victimized in crime. When we allow things to fester and to leave people alone who are vulnerable, literally pushed to the margins of our actual city, they become victimized. And we are leaving people to that, to be sustaining more trauma where they encounter trauma in the first place. I see my timer's going down. My next one is public safety, and the third is about addiction. And I want to highlight recovery and what that looks like. And I'm proud to be endorsed by Tom Hansen, who wrote American Junkie, who's lived through that.
Thank you. Candidate Davison, what is one position or policy that the current city attorney has taken or enacted that you agree with and why? You have 2 minutes to answer.
I agree with the challenge of the arbitrator's award and the firing of the police officer. As an arbitrator who's had an award challenged, I understand the role that that arbitrator takes, and it is very important. It's similar to a judge when we are resolving a legal dispute and reviewing discovery and motions submitted in court. They're submitted in an arbitrator in private setting. And so to have that be upheld was something I agree with that challenge.
Okay, candidate Thomas Kennedy. What is one position or policy that the current city attorney has taken or enacted that you agree with and why?
So I think Pete Holmes' administration has done a great job of defending the Jumpstart tax. I mean, really defending the progressive ordinances and legislation that the city council has been promulgating, I think is one of the great successes of his legacy of his tenure, and something that I look forward to continuing as well. Also on the arbitration clause, I think that maybe what my opponent was talking about is Pete Holmes wants to get rid of the post-firing arbitration clause that's in the police contract. That's not something that's been done yet, but that is something that I support as well.
Okay. So for the next question, we'll start with candidate Thomas Kennedy. Depending on your perspective of the city budget, where might you look to make spending cuts and/or how might you seek to raise more revenue? You have 2 minutes to answer.
So I don't think raising revenue is really like within the purview of the city attorney's office, but places that I can see making cuts are in the criminal division of the office. So right now I'm sorry, it's very loud outside my window. Right now we spend about $9 million prosecuting misdemeanors. That's just for the civil division of the city attorney's office. I think we could be doing a much better job with that. Each prosecution, sorry, it's so loud. Each prosecution costs about $9,000 each. And that's just a pure waste of money, in my opinion, especially when we have diversion programs that cost about a quarter of that. And actually helping survivors of crime would be significantly less as well. Something I would like to do with the budget as well is give some of my budget to the Human Services Department. I've been working on having a victims compensation fund where people and small businesses who have been the victims of economic crime, whether through shoplift or property destruction, can get immediate repair for those things. So you would just file a report and then you can get the money back for those misdemeanors through the Victims Compensation Fund. There is a study that was done for the last 4 years. I think the maximum amount of money that was owed through unpaid restitution for misdemeanors was $150,000. Last year, it was $90,000. So I think that's a really good use of the city attorney's budget, is to make sure that survivors of crimes are being made whole. And it's such a good use of our money, considering how much, considering it does cost $9,000, $10,000 to prosecute each case. And often the people we are prosecuting can't afford to pay that restitution. So that's something that I think that we can easily do with that budget, as well as using diversionary and mentorship programs that have better track records, frankly, than using jail and punishment.
Thank you. Candidate Davison, the same question to you. Depending on your perspective of the city budget, where might you look to make spending cuts and or how might you seek to raise more revenue?
Yeah, that is absolutely within the authority of the council and mayor, outside of the city attorney's role to set budgetary guidelines and suggestions. It's important to note that the law department is 38 million budget and about 16 million in the civil and 9 million in the criminal. And within that, I disagree at the cost for prosecution, but regardless, I think it's important to use the resources that are there in a meaningful way. And when we are talking about advocates for victims, it is a significant part. The role there for the city attorney is to be talking about that, to be seeking justice for victims of crime. And when it is looked to taxpayer funds, I think that's concerning. But I think the budget is significant to provide the safety that the government is supposed to provide for our city. That is the role of government, is to ensure the safety of the public and using those resources adequately.
Thank you. Candidate Davidson, how do you feel about the current ability of the city attorney's office to properly carry out its mission of prosecuting misdemeanors, address lawsuits against the city, and enact developmental programs? You have 2 minutes to answer.
I apologize. Can you read that again? My daughter was just calling and it flipped my screen, so I didn't hear your question.
Sure. How do you feel about the current ability of the city attorney's office to properly carry out its mission of prosecuting misdemeanors, addressing lawsuits against the city, and enacting developmental programs? You have 2 minutes to answer.
Oh, I apologize. Gosh, I'm trying to tell my daughter not to call me right now. The first part I missed. I very much apologize. The first part of the question, I heard the last part.
Yeah. How do you feel about the current ability of the city attorney's office to properly carry out its mission of prosecuting misdemeanors, addressing lawsuits against the city, and enacting developmental programs?
Well, there are great programs that are there right now that have shown a reduced rate of recidivism, and it's important to make sure that those can continue. And when we're looking at things without accountability, I think we're not serving the best interest of an individual or the public as a whole, in addition to the victims that had sustained any harm. When we're talking about crime, it's important to understand why someone's communicating in the form of a crime. And often the case is that socially we have failed that person repeatedly. And that is a responsibility that we all have to take personally and socially. And when it comes down to what we are doing within the department, the prosecution of crime so that people can function within our city, so people can run their small businesses, so they can provide jobs for people, so they can keep their workers safe at their business, so that families can go to the parks, so that a person can ride a bus, that a bus driver is not assaulted. All of these things are part of the management of a city, and the function of the government is to help provide that safety so that we can all go through our daily lives and not harm one another.
Thank you. Candidate Thomas Kennedy. How do you feel about the current ability of the city attorney's office to properly carry out its mission of prosecuting misdemeanors, addressing lawsuits against the city, and enacting developmental programs? You also have 2 minutes to answer.
Sure. So first, I would like to point out that I am the only attorney in this race that has actually worked in Seattle Municipal Court. And I think that's important to know because I know what kind of crimes are prosecuted there. And my opponent continually brings up crimes that aren't prosecuted there. Just now she brought up assault on a bus driver, which would be handled by King County District Court. But if you haven't worked in that courts, I wouldn't expect you to know. One thing I would say is that the when it comes to misdemeanors, what the prosecutor is bound to do is to use the responsibility of discretion to seek justice and also public safety. And so I will prosecute cases where the evidence shows it makes us safer. And in a lot of the cases, it doesn't. So that's where we really need to be building up those programs of community safety. Some of them are already out there, a lot of them are already out there. Some of them are currently being used by the city attorney's office to great success. Some of them need to be resourced more. There's lots of community programs of restorative justice, violence prevention, violence intervention. The community has been doing this work for a very long time. What they've needed is resources in order to continue and expand. And so my thinking is that if we stop spending so much money prosecuting poverty, we could actually meet people's basic needs, and then we can be expanding into those programs that are actually going to increase safety for us all, because it is the healthiest communities that are the safest. It's not the most over-policed or the most incarcerated communities that are the safest. In terms of defending lawsuits against the city, I mean, that is something that we don't really talk about that much in this race because we're really focused on the criminal side of things, but that is the most critical piece of what the city attorney does. I am a seasoned litigator. That is what I do. I have never lost a trial. I very much look forward to defending the city because there are a lot of big corporations and entities that would like to take advantage of what we have here and take advantage of our regressive tax laws. And we really need to be, if we want to move forward as a city, if we want to see the income inequality coming down, we really need to be defending Seattle against those big corporations.
Thank you. Candidate Thomas Kennedy, we'll start next question with you. One of the policy positions of the League of Women Voters is to implement a strong court administration that reduces jurisdictional overlap and effectively manages case overload. How would you advance this policy as city attorney? You have 2 minutes to answer.
Well, so the city attorney doesn't have, other than deciding what goes into court and what does not, the city attorney doesn't manage the court's load or how they manage those things at all. So I guess my approach would be there's some things that I think that we don't have community-based programs or the ability to let go of prosecution altogether for yet. A lot of it is interpersonal violence or repeat DUIs. I've said over and over again that prosecution has to remain an option in those cases. So, but I do anticipate that a Seattle Municipal Court, which is the only court that the city attorney for the criminal division has works within, having a lighter caseload and being able to manage that better, because I will be bringing less cases in there and diverting more things out. As far as the civil side, whether it's like state court or federal court, that is generally, the city attorney defends lawsuits. There is some affirmative litigation that's taken on, but I don't think that the city attorney has any role in managing the dockets of those or the caseload or workload or anything on the court side of those. So I hope I'm answering that question. I'm sorry if I'm not.
Thank you. Candidate Davison. One of the policy positions of the League of Women Voters is to implement a strong court administration that reduces jurisdictional overlap and effectively manages case overload. How would you advance this policy as city attorney? You also have 2 minutes to answer.
I think when you look at the people that I have brought together to support my campaign, it is a wide group of people from all walks of life, and includes 30 retired judges, to our former state Supreme Court justices, 2 Court of Appeals, and many others. And it's important to see that, because when we're talking about someone who is been called by them, the one who's clearly qualified in this race, the way that we do that is with collaboration and being able to bring stakeholders together and talking together. And I think that's an important aspect for that.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Davison, start with you for this question. Another policy position of the League of Women Voters is to develop and provide family, child, and youth development programs to prevent delinquency, crime, and/or recidivism. How would you advance this policy as city attorney? You have 2 minutes to answer.
I think that's a great question, and I appreciate that that's a policy position of the League. And it's something that I've spent personal time doing throughout my adult life, from from college days up through now, as a youth soccer coach, as a tutor through Central Area Youth Association. And I think that those are significant things that we all have to personally own as well, in addition to what we can do at the city attorney's office. As far as that goes, we have programs like Choose 180 that are great to be talking about for young adults, making sure that we have a way to provide a pathway that gives them a different message about themselves. I think that's really an important role. And when we can provide programs like that, that have a way that invite healing and a bettering of oneself, right? So that the social message isn't that I'm only going to become this. We really can change the trajectory of someone's life if we're telling them that they matter, and that what they have to contribute to our city and to our society is important. And we make space for that, and we do it by enhancing programs like that, and making sure that those are accessible and those opportunities are there for young adults, so that we can change the path for them, and show them that they matter. That's an important part.
Thank you. Candidate Thomas Kennedy. Another policy position of the League of Women Voters is to develop and provide family, child, and youth development programs to prevent delinquency, crime, and/or recidivism. How would you advance this policy as city attorney? You also have 2 minutes to answer.
Thank you. And so I appreciate what my opponent says. Absolutely, Choose 180 has been monumental for many young people in the city. That is a program that I would like to expand, and I have talked to Choose 180 about potentially expanding that program as well. We also have community passageways, which has made incredible inroads with youth in the city of Seattle. The thing that I would like to model the approach to misdemeanors on in Seattle is what actually has been done at King County Juvenile Court, where almost every court is referred to services or diverted out. And what's happened is there's been a huge reduction in recidivism, in calls to police, in referrals to police, in arrests. And so I think that, you know, that's a good place to look for in terms of a model of how we're going to do things. There's also lots of programs too that are getting started around restorative and transformative justice that are starting in family-based models. There is a program through Gay City right now that's being developed around family violence and how do we deal with that? Because also, again, just locking up our family members, that's not going to solve the problem. So we really need to be working on solutions that will get us to having healthy families. And that's why I am committed to finding restorative, transformative justice models and mentorship programs and expanding the diversionary programs that we already have that work with youth. I mean, there's really few things that are more important than making sure that our youth are prepared for the future. And the current method that we have right now of incarcerating youth it doesn't get us anywhere. It actually has been shown that the more we prosecute young people for petty crimes, the more they end up in the system. So the way for all of us to be safer and healthier is to treat our youth with respect and compassion and mentorship. And that's what I would like to do moving forward.
Thank you. I'd like to again encourage audience members to submit questions at the bottom of their screen using the Q&A button, and we're going to get to several audience questions now. This one, you'll have 1 minute to respond. We'll start with candidate Thomas Kennedy. As city attorney, how would you prioritize which misdemeanor cases, such as shoplifting and wage theft, to prosecute?
Okay, so first, wage theft is a gross misdemeanor. It's something that's currently never prosecuted for a whole host of reasons, but I wouldn't prosecute it either. My approach to wage theft would be putting a boss in jail for, you know, a temporary period of time isn't going to actually remedy the situation, and it's not going to get the worker their money back. What I would like to do is go after the bottom line. Workers need their money back. That's why I would like to have a wage theft clinic where workers can come in and get redress for those things immediately without having to go through a long, lengthy process of finding an attorney. Also, I would litigate bigger cases of wage theft. We just had the Pagliacci case that was got settled. I would intervene as the city with that. With shoplifting cases, it really is about what caused things. So we are talking about misdemeanors. These are low-level shoplifts. So if a shoplift if it's caused by poverty or addiction or mental health, those are the things that I would address. That doesn't necessarily mean I wouldn't prosecute them, but there would have to be an evidence-based reason for doing so.
Thank you. Candidate Davison. As city attorney, how would you prioritize which misdemeanor cases such as shoplifting and wage theft to prosecute? You also have 1 minute to respond.
The approach I think that we need most immediately is to focus on high impact crime. And for me, that means a varying viewpoint of how we look at what is crime doing to our city and where can we make the most difference. And that's a fluid approach because it's not going to be a categorical one. And when we're talking about business in regard to that question, again, we want to make sure that businesses of all types in all neighborhoods are able to stay functioning. They are providing jobs, they are providing tax revenue, and they are providing resources and services to their neighborhoods. And that's an important aspect, particularly in downtown. Downtown is a neighborhood, it's a residential neighborhood in addition to being our core. And that is a significant issue I've heard from many people that live there. That is an important part. So it's a way to look at it in a high impact way.
Thank you. So you'll now have 2 minutes to respond to another audience question. We'll start with candidate Davison. Which of the proposed policies in your platform do you plan on implementing as soon as you are elected, i.e. those that do not require any changes in budget or law?
Yeah, I most definitely want to stay not changes to budget. I think that's important at the outset when we're talking about that amount of money. And again, it is that version, it's the high impact crime. Again, what's not going to be a categorical approach, whereas we might hear the dismantling of the criminal division or not prosecuting and dismantling police. I'm saying looking at it from a high impact part to our city, to everyone across every sector, because quality of life impacts everyone. When I'm supported by police reform leaders, it's important to hear that, because when we're talking about, those are often the communities that are most experiencing the high impact of crime. And when we're doing that, it is a way to have better policing, relational policing, in a way that provides that safety for everyone. And so looking at it from that perspective with a high impact, that's going to be the way that we can do it. And it doesn't cost us anything. It's just a way to be efficient and have a different way of analyzing things as they come in.
Thank you. Candidate Thomas Kennedy, which of the proposed policies in your platform do you plan on implementing as soon as you're elected, i.e. those that do not require any changes in budget or law? You also have 2 minutes to respond.
So I don't intend to make any huge changes to the civil division at all. I think that they're doing a great job. So really the changes that I want to make are in the criminal division primarily. None of the things that I'm talking about require a change of law or budget. So everything that I'm talking about, whether it's survivor-based services, diversionary programs, mentorship, community-based programs, restorative or transformative justice, all of those things are less expensive than traditional prosecution. All of them. Prosecution is the most expensive and most intrusive way of dealing with all of these problems. So, the things that I would like to do with the budget that I'm not spending is to actually resource things that we desperately need in Seattle, which are survival services, housing, things like that. I'm under no impression that I can take some of the budget from the criminal division and solve the housing problem in Seattle, but the housing problem in Seattle is something that we're all responsible for, and that having a budget that huge that I'm not, it's so loud here, I'm sorry, that are not used when we're not using all of it can be used for that. But there's no changes in law that would need to be made initially. The job of the city attorney is to use discretion to determine which charges to file, not to file every charge, which is why we've never seen wage theft prosecuted, for instance. So it really is, there's nothing changes in the law that are required in order to use that discretion. I anticipate having some extra budget, but I would be using that for community-based program, which is a very easy thing to do. It's already being done in the city budget. It would just be kind of an increase of doing that while we scale back on doing the most expensive, intrusive thing that we know doesn't work anymore.
Thank you. Okay, you'll also have 2 minutes to respond to this. We'll start with candidate Thomas Kennedy. How would you ensure nonpartisanship in the office of city attorney?
So I think how would I ensure nonpartisanship? So the city attorney really has to, what is in the interest of justice and safety? I don't really see I mean, I'm going to be following the evidence. I'm going to be following the data about what that means. And I'm going to be listening to survivors. So that will be my approach on one side. On the other side, it really will be about defending the legislation that the city council passes. I am the only Democrat in this race, as is everyone on the city council, everyone that's running for city council, and everyone that's running for mayor. So my values will align with them in that regard. But I don't, I mean, those are the two aspects of the office that, I mean, I do think maybe having like I don't know how to answer that, I guess. I'm sorry. You know, I share values with the council, so I will be able to collaborate with them easier. And on the other side, I really do think that we need to be using an evidence-based, data-driven approach that supports survivors more than what we do now.
Thank you. Candidate Davison, how would you ensure nonpartisanship in the Office of City Attorney?
I think that's a critical question, because the role of an attorney is not to provide personal advice or opinion when you provide advice to your client in a private setting. And in a public setting, it's even more important to understand the role there is to provide legal advice. And the law is to be impartial. And so if someone is unable to provide that and is providing alternative ways that to put in their own agenda, their own policy, their own political slant, that's not giving those who are elected to make those decisions the true legal advice upon which they can create the best decision making. When we provide the framework by which they can make a choice, it's similar to what I do in my practice. It's a preventative nature to avoid litigation. You make this choice, these are the legal consequences of that choice. If you make this choice, here are the legal consequences of that choice. And then provide that for those who are elected to make those decisions for our city. And that is a way to do that, and is with professionalism. Again, that's why I am endorsed by 30 retired judges, 2 former governors of our state, a constitutional law expert in our area, Hugh Spitzer. It's important to understand that the profession is significant, and it must be held in that way, of that highest standard, so that we really can be a functioning city. And that's a critical piece. And I take that seriously and personally to endeavor to make sure that I establish that trust, and that my personal opinion or anything of that nature is not what the role is. It is to help provide them that legal strategy so they can make those decisions.
Okay, thank you. So again, I encourage audience members to please submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We have one more audience question right now. We'll have 2 minutes to answer. We'll start with candidate Davison. As city attorney, how would you approach defending the city on policies you personally disagree with?
Well, similar to what I just said, it's not about how I think about it. It's what does the law say, and what did our elected leaders decide? That is to be defended. And if we provided good legal advice, hopefully there's less litigation challenge about those decisions. But regardless, that is the position and the role of the city attorney to do that, and to provide a consistent throughout the department, so that whoever is being asked the questions, if the issue is noted to us, we are able to set that consistently, so that whoever asks us the question, the same answer is provided. And that is how you run the law department, so that the consistency is there on the legal advice side to various departments and officials running our city.
Thank you. And candidate Thomas Kennedy, you also have 2 minutes to respond. As city attorney, how would you approach defending the city on policies you personally disagree with?
Thanks. This is a great question. So first of all, I would like to say law is not a math equation. There's a lot that goes into it, and deciding how to advise people depends on a lot of different things. But the city attorney's job is not to be a judge, an impartial judge, just sort of parsing things out. The city attorney is an advocate for the city. That is the major role of the city attorney, is to defend the city. Sometimes that's through affirmative litigation. A lot of times that's through defense, because no matter how many times or how many ways we try to create the most defensible, legally sound laws, They're going to be challenged. They are challenged right now. The challenges are going to be endless, and we need a litigator in that position. And as a litigator, you need to be an advocate. You need to be a defender. And that is what I am. I was a public defender. I've handled over 400 criminal cases. Not all of those cases were my favorite clients, and I did that job. It had nothing to do with whether I agreed with what happened or didn't happen. It had everything to do with the fact that that was my client, who I was bound to defend. It's something that I've done over and over and over again. Like I said at the top, I've never lost a trial. Defense is what I do. So no matter who that is, it doesn't matter, because the city is my client and I look forward to defending this city.
Thank you. You'll now have 1 minute to answer the following question. We'll start with candidate Thomas Kennedy. What are 3 skills or traits that you believe a city attorney absolutely must have?
So I think the first one is passion. I think the city attorney needs to have passion for what they're doing. And that I definitely have passion defending and representation, advocacy. It's what I do. It's something I truly love to do. I think collaboration and teamwork is extremely important. I have relationships with people already in city government. I am endorsed by state representatives, county council members, city council members. So I already have those relationships established, and I look forward to developing them even more. And then I think that criticism is the other thing that's really critical. No matter, this is an office with over 200 attorneys, there's going to be, and there's complex litigation that's happening at all times. There needs to be an open line of communication and the ability to take criticism. I am open I can openly say, I know that I don't know everything. And I look forward to relying on the expertise that's already in the office, and hearing the feedback of other lawyers as well.
Candidate Davison, what are 3 skills or traits that you believe a city attorney absolutely must have? You have 1 minute to answer.
I don't think I need the whole minute, but thank you. I think it is professionalism. It is the ability to listen and the ability to lead. Those I think are the 3 things that must be there for our city attorney to have a successful law department for our city.
Thank you. Start next question with candidate Davison. You'll have 2 minutes to respond. How do you plan to deal with repeat offenders? Are there any current processes that you would change to more effectively respond?
And that question is something that we've been talking about in the city for a while, and it's a complicated question. And I really look at it from two vantage points. One is personally, right? Because when I talk about understanding people, I have an uncle who has schizophrenia. I regularly do outreach in encampments, and crime is being done by people who are housed and unhoused, right? Victims are housed and unhoused. So it's not necessarily that we're talking about categorically someone who's in a status, right? We're not talking about that. When we're looking at someone who has been repeatedly committing criminal acts that are harmful to others in our city, it's incumbent upon the city attorney to intervene on behalf of that person, on behalf of victims and the public. So I do, again, want to look at that in a high impact analysis, to which if someone is not responsive to non-criminal interventions that we've provided opportunity to, it is the place that we must intercede. And I think that is a way we can actually use our compassionate beings that we have here in our city in a way that is meaningful. Because when we're looking at that, we need to understand why is that occurring, but we must address it. And so to have a high impact unit that is looking at that, so it's not necessarily a categorical approach to one type of crime or any type of status, but it is about what can we do for that individual. And that needs to be probably coming across where I have direct knowledge of that. That's what I would like to have.
Thank you. Candidate Thomas Kennedy, you will also have 2 minutes to respond. How do you plan to deal with repeat offenders? Are there any current processes you would change to more effectively respond?
Sure. So I think the repeat offender question is really the best question we can ask about the current system. So currently what we have is a system that continuously cycles people in and out of the system. We're talking about misdemeanors. The maximum sentence for a misdemeanor is less than a year in jail. Everybody that gets in is gonna come back out. And what's happening right now is people go in for, a certain amount of time, they get back out, they're in a worse situation than they were before. If they had a job, now they've lost it. If they had a home, it's probably gone. If they slept in their car probably got towed. So every single time they're going in, they're getting more and more destabilized. I think the first thing that we can do is try to keep first offenders out of the system. That's the thing that's been shown. Boston and Baltimore has done this. King County Juvenile Court has done this. The more we keep people out of the system, the less they're coming back. So I think that's the first approach that we can do, is try to keep people out in the first place. The second thing is, when we look at a lot of the prolific offenders that have been profiled in the media, we're talking about people that are living unsheltered, that usually have co-occurring substance use and mental health disorders. Those people go into jail, they come back out, they're back on the street. That's why it's failing. It's never going to work. And that's why we do need to be taking different approaches. And so I would like to take approaches that are based on outreach, that are based on housing first, that really address these problems, get to the root of them, and actually make an effort towards solving these underlying problems. Like I said at the beginning, putting someone in jail for a year costs $75,000, $73,000. Putting someone in wraparound housing, permanent supportive housing with wraparound on-site case management service, mental health services, medical service, medication management costs $25,000 a year. That's what we should be spending our money on. And that is the way that we are going to get some real change and some real movement on those types of issues.
Thank you. We'll go to another audience question. You'll have 1 minute to respond. We'll start with candidate Thomas Kennedy. What is your favorite thing to do in and around Seattle?
My favorite thing to do around Seattle, my office is actually really close to Fairview Park right now. And I mean, I don't know if you've been able to hear, but it's very, very loud where I live. So I like to take a walk from my office and go to Fairview Park. And there's actually a really wonderful free little library that's very close to Fairview Park. And so I love to get a book out of that free little library and just sit at that park because it's so quiet and nice there. So that's currently my favorite thing to do in Seattle right now.
Thank you. Candidate Davison, what is your favorite thing to do in Seattle?
Well, it used to be going to live music shows, but that's a little bit not happening right now. But Seattle's made me a distance runner. I used to be a biker when I moved here, but when I broke the crank off my pedal off my crank, I decided to be a distance runner. So I like running our hills and just our beautiful areas that we have.
Great. Thank you both. I have another audience question. He'll have 2 minutes to respond. We'll start with candidate Davison. Do you believe that case experience is necessary for a city attorney to have, and why or why not?
What type of case experience?
Case experience.
I mean, I think it's important to understand there's a lot of different ways of lawyering, if you want to use that as a verb. And so again, there are litigators, there are transactional attorneys, and there are advisors. We all take those roles on, and I've done all of those things. And I think it's a significant thing to understand that when you've been in practice for 17 years, there's a wide variety of experience. Working with a wide variety of clients, and that's a significant piece. Understanding how to navigate difficult personalities, helping people come to the table in legal disputes is a significant way to make some difference. And so that's, I think, an important part of it, more so than just a strict case experience as the question called for.
Thank you. Candidate Thomas Kennedy, do you believe that case experience is necessary for a city attorney to have, and why or why not?
I absolutely think case experience is necessary. I mean, the city attorney is in court constantly. I think it's very important to know the rules of criminal as well as civil procedure, the evidence rules, everything that you need to know in order to conduct yourself in court, how to file briefs, how to argue motions. Those are only things that you learn when you are actually the attorney of record on actual litigation cases. So, I mean, in addition to that, like, the experience that you get from negotiating all of those cases, working with those difficult personalities, whether they're your client or the prosecutor or a judge, there's just a level of intensity around both legal analysis and soft skills that you only get from working those cases. And so, yes, I think it's extremely important. I think it would be difficult for someone who has little to no case experience to come into the office and understand the criminal division is all litigation and the civil division is primarily litigation. And so like that advice and counsel aspect is something that you still do when you have cases. But if you don't actually work any cases, you don't have any of the other, 85% of what a lawyer does, which seems pretty critical to understanding how legal things are going to move forward. If you just don't understand how the court system works, then I don't really know how you can provide good legal advice. So yes, I do think it's very important.
Thank you. I'll start the next question with candidate Thomas Kennedy. You'll have 2 minutes to respond. How can the courts ensure that a person receives necessary services? Let me rephrase that. How can the city attorney's office ensure that a person receives the necessary services without prosecution, without prosecution or the tools that the legal route provides?
So first of all, I'm not taking prosecution off the table. So, I've said that a bunch of times, but so that is one lever of doing things. I think what people don't realize, I think that this is where my experience in that realm really comes into play, and my experience with clients in particular. There are a lot of people that come through our criminal system that actually do want to take accountability, but the way our system is currently set up, there's not really a means for doing that. The most common or the easiest way to do it would be through a compromise of misdemeanor, which is like a legal process. But there really is a way we can streamline that process, because there are people who come into that system that want to say, like, listen, I did this and I'm sorry, and I want to make repair. And there are people that have been victimized or survivors that don't want to go through a testimony, months of being on call for a witness, to be a witness or things like that. There's other ways that we can deal with that. It's the thing is that right now, the way we approach things is really this one size fits all, where it's just kind of prosecution or not, one or two diversion programs or not. And I think that that's where the idea of having other options comes into play. We have a whole mental health court. Most of the people that are in that mental health court voluntarily engage with services. So do we need a lawyer and a judge and everyone overseeing it? It's the most expensive aspect of the process. And we have so many people that can't get mental health help. I think there's this idea that if you wanted help with mental health, you could just go to like Sound Mental Health and get substance use treatment or mental health treatment. And that's just not the case. Those programs are so under-resourced. And so if we want to make mental health help available to more people, we need to be putting our resources in those areas. And there's a lot of people that would engage with them. And like I said, prosecution is always a last resort, but I really think that there's better ways to get there. There's just other ways, and it requires building relationship with people as well.
Thank you. Candidate Davison, how can the city attorney's office ensure that a person receives the necessary services without prosecution or the tools that the legal route provides?
Well, first, I just want to make sure we understand that when we're talking about the role of the city attorney, it is one of a leader and not daily in court. Again, when we have the experience of 30 retired judges who probably have presided over hundreds of thousands of cases, 2 of which have been the presiding judges in Seattle Municipal Court, endorsing me in a joint statement that's on my website. I will let that speak for itself in regards to experience and qualifications for this job. When it comes to talking about people's needs and what we can do, this is the place where we can intervene before things do increase in severity for an individual. And so sometimes I think that is a necessary thing that we can provide. The supervision we can provide sometimes is in the form of court probation. It's important to have that aspect. There are ways to have diversionary intervention as well. But again, when we have that accountability piece, when I consult with a psychiatrist who has endorsed me, Dr. Rick Reese, who's the heads of the addictions department at UW School of Medicine, and understanding it from his perspective and what we're trying to make sure we are addressing for individuals, there are gaps that we have that we can adequately address. We can make sure we get those strategic gaps lined up in a way that we are making sure we are helping people. There is progress to be made, and we can do it. And I look forward to doing it if I'm elected.
Thank you. Candidate Davison, we'll start with you for the next question. You'll have 2 minutes to respond. So everyone running for office would presumably like to be elected, but if election day comes and goes and you are not elected, how do you plan on staying engaged in the community and enacting change?
That's a very lovely question, because I think everyone here is engaged at some point, and I think there's a lot of people within our city that, lives are just busy here in America, and sometimes people are just able to get by themselves. And I think that's an important conversation to make sure if you have, what's called time, talent, or treasure, that we give it back. And that's where I felt obligated to be involved. Again, looking at the 11,751, that is our King County point in time count, I personally felt obligated to make sure I'm using what I have, the skill set that I have, in a way that's meaningful. So I will still continue to do that in ways that are meaningful. But that might be in a one-on-one situation, as I've done in the past and would continue to do in various roles, because I take that seriously. And I take it also that upon myself to motivate others to do that, which is why I'm really thankful there's been so many who have joined the campaign who have not been politically involved otherwise. But it has been a source of hope to see that we can contribute to make a difference to our city. And I think that's the way forward for all of us, because we do all have something to contribute. It's really important to acknowledge that and to make space for that. And that's how I would be engaged. Thanks.
Candidate Thomas Kennedy, if the election comes and goes and you are not elected, how would you plan on staying engaged in the community and enacting change?
Sure. So I would stay engaged with the community and enact change in the same way that I always have. I have always been working for social justice in Seattle, back from the Iraq war years when I was in community college and protesting the war and organizing against that, up to the uprising of 2020, in which I did a lot of legal observing, worked for the National Lawyers Guild, started a group, the King County Defender Collective, where we represented protesters pro bono and really did whatever I could to support the movement toward racial justice. So since I've been a candidate, I think it's one of the things that I've really enjoyed about it is community building, is reaching out to so many different community organizations and finding out what they do and how I can collaborate with them. So whether that's Collective Justice, the Freedom Project, Black Action Coalition, Mazasca Talks, there's a lot of work to be done in the community. And for me, whether I get this position or not, it is about building horizontal power with the community. Community has the ability to take care of itself in many ways. And the communities that are under-resourced are the ones that are having the hardest time. The communities that are resourced, I'm not so worried about. They already live in a police-free society where they don't have to deal with a lot of gun violence. We really need to be focusing on the communities where they are working on those problems themselves and resourcing those communities themselves. Whether I'm elected or not, that's what needs to happen. And that's the work that I'm committed to doing. That is the work that I have always done. So whether I stay a defense attorney or whether I become city attorney and get to actually build out that web of community-based systems and resource them, which would be wonderful, or not, that is the work that I will continue doing whether I'm elected or not.
Thank you. So you'll have 2 minutes to respond to this question. We'll start with candidate Thomas Kennedy. In the news recently, there's been stories of a number of individuals who choose not to comply with employer vaccine mandates and therefore will end up leaving their jobs. One industry or organizations that these have occurred in are, of course, healthcare, as well as police. Do you see any of these impacting your work as Seattle attorney, and how would you address it?
I mean, so the city attorney's office had a vaccine mandate that was actually before the citywide mandate, and everyone in the city attorney's office already complied. So I don't see it being an issue in the office themselves, that office. How that affects the rest of Seattle is really up to those different departments to deal with themselves. I really think that if you're interacting with the public, whether it's police or healthcare, you should be getting vaccinated. I mean, it's the least you can do for the health of this city. And so, I mean, I support those departments doing what, man, now there's a helicopter. I support those departments doing whatever they need to do in order to get those employees vaccinated. I mean, there's just like, there's really no excuse for that, in my opinion.
Candidate Davison, you will also have 2 minutes to respond. In the news, there's been stories of folks who are choosing not to comply with employer vaccine mandates and will therefore leave their jobs, leaving gaps in professions like healthcare as well as policing. Do you see this impacting your work as Seattle City Attorney, and how would you address it?
Well, this is a serious topic, which crosses over into what we have available to us in this country, our individual freedoms, and the concept of public health. And what's important to understand is that all those departments that were just referenced look to the city attorney's office for that guidance. That is what the role of the city attorney is to do, is to provide guidance for that. For example, there's many that are waiting on, oh, what should we do in this? And so that is, again, the consistent legal advice I'm talking about earlier that is needing to be provided by the city attorney's office.
Thank you. And I want to take a moment to encourage folks to submit any last questions to the Q&A, as we are almost wrapping up at the end of our questions. Do have a few more for you though. So we'll start this next one with Candidate Davison. You'll have 1 minute to respond. The past year and a half has been hard on communities. What's one source of light that has gotten you through the past year and a half?
That's very nice that people ask us personal questions. Well, besides my own kids and our dogs, it really is just exercise. I find that's the best thing for me. I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and CrossFit, and I'm a distance runner. So I find that that's really the best thing for me to clear my head and to just kind of create my own ecosystem of energy. And that's what's helped me get through the time.
Thank you. Candidate Thomas Kennedy. The past year and a half has been hard on communities. What has been a source of light that has gotten you through the past 18 months?
So much like my opponent, I'm a mother, definitely my daughter, amazing, and also just, it's been really wonderful. As hard as it's also been nice to have time with my family. You know, when I was a public defender, I was working 70+ hours a week. And so all of a sudden I found myself at home, and it was nice to actually spend that time with my family. And I feel really grateful for that. And other than that, music, like, I play drums, I play bass, and luckily so does my husband. And so that is something that we have been able to do together, and something that I truly enjoy, and is really kind of helpful when nothing else is, it seems like. Thank
you. Candidate Thomas Kennedy, we'll start this next question with you. You'll have 90 seconds to respond. What is something that you and your opponent have in common, and where do you think you differ the most?
So I think the thing that we most have in common is that we recognize that there is a problem. So, there's a problem. There's too many people living on the street. People don't feel safe. I think where we diverge is how do we get to a place where we're solving these problems. And so I don't agree that under prosecution, I think is what she said before, is to blame for our problems. I think what we need to do is get to the root of those problems, because I would like to see some real long-term change and healing. And I also recognize, having worked in the system, that it is not survivor-centered and it doesn't meet victims' needs. And so I would really like to change how we address survivor needs and what we can give them. And so, because what I'm really focused on is prevention, repair, and safety. And the only way that we're going to get there is if we take a new approach that actually addresses the reality of what the underlying problems are.
Thank you. Candidate Davison, what is something that you and your opponent have in common, and where do you think you differ the most? You also have 90 seconds to respond.
Yeah, I agree that understanding why someone is, I call it communicating in the form of a criminal act, it's really incumbent upon all of us individually and socially to understand that. And usually when that's occurring, it's because we've failed that person socially over and over again. And so I think that obligation needs to be owned by all of us individually and collectively. Where we diverge is absolutely when she wants to dismantle the criminal division and dismantle having police and prosecution of misdemeanor crimes here in our city. That is no way to keep a city that's about 800,000 people safe. As you look at the statement provided for me, an endorsement from Governor Gregoire and Governor Locke, they agree that I am the right person for this job because we have to have realistic and pragmatic approaches to safety where we can balance compassion, making sure we are intervening where we need to, and keeping the public safe.
Thank you. Have another question. You'll have 2 minutes to respond to this. We will start with Candidate Davison. What is one thing you would want Seattle's mayor and city council members to know about issue facing the city attorney's office? You'll have 2 minutes to answer.
What I'd want them to know about an issue? Is that what the...
What is one thing that you would want the Seattle mayor and city council members to know about? Sorry, let me rephrase it a little more clear. What is one thing that you want the Seattle mayor and city council members to know about the city attorney's office?
Okay. I think that I want them to know that it's the place where they can get consistent legal advice. As I said it earlier, that is the way where we will going to be able to have really productive decision-making, is have professionalism, high standards of ethics, and that means conduct in a way that is impartial in providing that legal advice. I'm not speaking of it like a judge that was referenced earlier. I'm saying, what does the law provide so that we are giving creative legal strategies so that we can deal with some of these difficult issues and some of the log jams, frankly, that we have for like permits, for example, on the zoning side. There's things that we can do with a strategic way that is creative lawyering, as we like to call it, that would be available for them. And I would want to make sure that they know I'm a trusted resource for that, and as would all of the attorneys within the department, so that we have consistent legal advice that is provided to the departments of our city as we function for everyone's future.
Thank you. Candidate Thomas Kennedy, what is one thing you would want Seattle's mayor and city council members to know about the city attorney's office?
I would want to know I'm actually I'm in it for solutions, that and that I won't do things that are politically convenient. It would be much more politically convenient for me to be tough on crime, for instance, or to take a lock 'em up approach. It's usually it's something that we've been sold for a long time is what's going to keep us safe, and the evidence and the data just doesn't support that. So I would want them to know that I am going to do what's where the evidence I'm going to do and advise what I think and what I know is where the evidence and the data leaves, because I really do want to solve Seattle's problems, and we have to move forward on our approaches. And that means we have to look at the reality of what's going on. I don't think that there's anyone that's on the city council or any candidate for mayor that actually likes the way things are right now. Everybody wants to solve these problems. It's going to take all of us coming together and collaborating to get those things done. And I would just want them to know that, like, I'm in it to win it. And so it's time to solve some of these problems.
Okay, thank you. We have now reached the end of our round of questions. I really appreciate all of the audience members who submitted questions. Thank you so much. Candidates, you will now be able to provide closing statement, you'll have 2 minutes to do so. Candidate Thomas Kennedy, we will start with you.
Thank you. So thanks for having me, and I appreciate your questions. So we all deserve to be safe in our homes and on our streets. And in pursuit of this endeavor, we have poured ever more money into cops' courts and jails, getting worse return on our investment. It's time to move into something new, something's based in evidence, something that's based in strategy, and something that will ensure safety for all of Seattle. We need to scale up healthy communities while scaling back on what doesn't work. And temporary punishment, harsh punishment, expensive and intrusive prosecution has been shown not to work. So we really need to be resourcing communities, because the healthiest communities are the safest, not the ones that are the most policed. It's not surprising that my opponent is endorsed by retired lawmakers and judges. They were the architects of mass incarceration, and that is exactly what I am speaking back to and saying that we need to step away from. There's a reason why my campaign has been endorsed by all 8 Democratic groups, the majority of unions, and current elected leaders in the city, state, and county. I alone have worked in the criminal legal system, and I know what needs to change. I have done over 600 cases, 400 criminal cases, 200 civil cases, and I have never lost a single trial. Seattle needs an advocate and a defender. We need a city attorney that will defend Seattle against the greed of large corporations who oppose progressive taxation, happy to let homeowners and low-income residents carry an outsized tax burden. We need a lawyer who's not afraid to take on mega landlords who want to overturn our tenant protections to line their own pockets, or fossil fuel companies that have knowingly destroyed our environment to make extra money. Seattle needs a strong defender who will stand up to power in service of the people, and that is who I am. I hope to earn your vote next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Thomas Kennedy. Candidate Davison, you now have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you again, everyone, for taking time to listen this evening. And if you're listening to it recorded, whatever time of day you happen to be listening to us, that is the benefit of doing things in this type of venue. I am really honored to be speaking to you tonight and running for city attorney, and to make sure that you understand who I am and why I'm running for this office, and how I got into it. I decided the day before filing at my birth mother's deathbed to enter this race. She put me up for adoption, and I now have a skill set and a capacity and a capability because of my adoptive parents. Sorry, my battery is running low. It's not charging. So I want to make sure I'm not going to lose you in the last minute. And that is why I'm in here, because it's really important to understand that what we are leaving socially behind for our children to inherit is important. So when you look at who is backing me, regardless of how they were just gravely mischaracterized, these are people who have chosen public service in the form of our former Attorney General and Governor Christian Gregoire, someone who used to be a King County prosecutor, and our Governor Gary Locke, as well as 30 retired judges. I'm endorsed by the Seattle Times, labor unions, professional attorneys, formerly elected prosecutors, medical experts, people in recovery, police reform leaders. It is about unification for our city. It is not about doing things one way. It really is about the real meaning of the word collaboration, so that we can have safety across our city. When we hear that from communities, they say they want to be safe, or they say they want to be able to function. We need to provide that. And I encourage you to look at my website, Neighbors for Ann, reach out if you have questions, and I would appreciate your vote on November 2nd. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much to candidates Davison and Thomas Kennedy for your time. We really appreciated you speaking to the audience tonight. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, Seattle King County Voter Services team for coordinating this forum. And thank you so much to our audience members and volunteers. Please don't forget to vote and turn in your ballot before 8 p.m. on November 2nd. Thank you all so much, and good night.